Welcome back to part 2 of our Halloween special. We're back in my end of London now, Plaistow, or as some of the young people would say, back in the ends fam, innit? And we're going to be studying the Plaistow Ghost, which is not a ghost, and grave robbing. The first one I hope you'll find as amusing as I did. Second one, complete polar opposite of amusing. But it is interesting to have a walk and visit the lady's house in question. So, off we go. The Plaistow Ghost. Not a ghost as such, but an interesting little episode that happened in the latter Victorian era. So we'll be visiting that in a sec. This is just an AI image to start us off with. This is the cemetery by daytime. Over to the right, where you see this fence, that's no longer there now, it's luxury flats. And over to the left, where was a house, that's not there anymore, now that's going to be luxury flats too. A little tribute to our First World War heroes while we're here. Here is the cemetery, marked with the blue arrow. And our two main protagonists. George Orchard, he was aged 16 in 1889 when this event occurred. And Mr. Ernest Bagley, new police magistrate. He went fairly easy on George, so he was okay, obviously an okayish chap. Yeah, these are our main protagonists, and you're now going to join me outside East London Cemetery, where I'll walk you through the story and you'll be talked through the story. So join me for that now. And here we are, East London Cemetery, Grange Road, and the story of the Plaistow Ghost, which you're going to hear now. And I'll walk you from here, which is the main entrance to the cemetery, to the location of where all the trouble began. As I say, it wasn't a real ghost, it was probably a load of pissed up Londoners, but off we go. So,
the Plaistow Ghost. Credit to London Overlooked for this story. We're in Plaistow, along Grange Road and Upper Road, and here is the East London Cemetery. At the time of our story, the cemetery was still relatively new, having been established only 17 years previously in 1872. What happened in 1889 was this. Throughout May, crowds had been gathering on a nightly basis in Upper Road in order to see a ghost, rumored to be residing among the tombstones. The ghost could not have been all that frightening, for it was reported that the crowd spent most of the time behaving badly. They pushed passers-by off the path and generally larked about. One solid and sober witness to these scenes was Herbert Dubry, a police constable in his mid-20s attached to the K Orbo division. One night towards the end of May, he had been keeping his eye on the rubbernecks, which had been his constant occupation for the past few weeks. He estimated that they numbered about 200. However, although he had a dim view of the crowd, as a whole, it was the behavior of one particular individual that caught his attention. That individual was George Orchard, of number 77 Grange Road, who was 16 years old and worked in a brass foundry. George's behavior, certainly as reported by the doughty constable, was very odd indeed. He shinned up a lamp post, and, having reached the lamp itself, turned the gas down until the light went out. This was too much for Constable Dubry, and he promptly took the boy into custody. On Monday the 27th of May, George appeared before the magistrate, Mr. Ernest Bagley, at the West Ham Police Court in Stratford. 2 charges were made against him. The first, which was disorderly conduct, must have had a tiresomely familiar ring. For the antics outside the East London Cemetery had been annoying the keepers of the peace for longer than they cared to remember. But the second charge, which was willfully extinguishing a public street lamp, would surely have raised a magisterial eyebrow or two. When asked how he pleaded in answer to the second of the two charges, George claimed that he had turned the gas light off simply because people had asked him to. He elaborated. With the gas light on, the street and that part of the cemetery adjacent to the street were fully illuminated, which made it difficult to see the ghost. The what? Bagley spluttered, while the courtroom filled with laughter. A ghost? Yes, George replied. And I was asked to put the lamp out. Constable Dubry was called as a witness. The crime had been committed at 10:30 at night, he stated, when he had been on duty in Upper Road. This road is close to the cemetery, is it not? Bagley asked. Yes, replied the copper. It is very lonely. Not lonely if there were 200 people there, the magistrate countered. But the sober Dubry was not unsettled by Bagley's quip. He told the court that Upper Road was long and had no houses on it, and that it really was not the sort of road that one wanted to be immersed in darkness. And it has to be said that the constable had a point. For on the map issued by the post office in 1886, Upper Road can be seen to emerge from West Ham Abbey Marsh and edge its way north, with the cemetery on its western side, and very little on its eastern side. Wayfarers would have welcomed a gaslight that bathed the road in a comforting glow, banishing at least some of the inky gloom, and making it harder for ne'er-do-wells to steal up on them. Turn down the gas, dim the light, and you were left alone with your fears, seeing nothing other than the shadowy shapes of the graves, hearing nothing other than the ghostly sough of the wind. Fowler was now getting into his stride. And when Dubry was quizzed about the disorderly crowds and reported that the cemetery keeper had been patrolling for several nights with a gun to keep the roughs away, he seized the opportunity. There is some suspicion of body snatching, he asked with carefully feigned surprise. I've never heard of it, the constable replied. Now it was Bagley's turn to intervene. I read of it this morning, he said. Perhaps the press were before the police for once. London Overlooked have scoured the newspapers for a report of body snatching in the East London cemetery, and sadly we have found nothing. Given that this unsavoury practice was by then a thing of the past, it is possible that the magistrate was indulging in some pointed humour. We shall never know. But what we do know is that he took a lenient line with George Orchard, advising him not to go around dimming gas lights. The boy was given a good character reference by Inspector Edwin Bishop, who had questioned him at the police station, whereupon Bagley concluded that he had simply done as he had been told, and sent him on his way, adding that he expected the police to do a better job of controlling the crowds in Upper Road.
And here we are, Upper Road, and roughly about the location of where all this crowd gathered. Well over 200 people. Well, that looks weird. We're looking into the cemetery, and yeah, this is where everyone gathered and thought they saw a ghost, which was not a ghost, it was a headstone, a gravestone. I've made inquiries, and the gravestone of in particular, that one and of that era, was 1870s and no longer exists. Was replaced in the 1970s or 80s, or reused in the 1970s or 80s, so replaced with newer graves. But the cemetery would have been relatively new in those days. 1889. Yeah, 1889, when all this happened. the houses that we walked past here didn't exist. They're 1890s, those houses. So this was, as the constable and the magistrate found out at the time, a really lonely road lit by a single gas light. Now, George Orchard of Grange Road, his address, unfortunately, was swept away by the Second World War, but I will point you down to where it is, and then I'll be leading you on to our next, not ghost story or anything like that, more unpleasant than anything, a little piece of East London Cemetery's history that I thought I would cover on Halloween. George Orchard, the 16-year-old lad who shinnied up the drain pipe and, the gaslight, and turned out the gaslight, the 77 Grange Road. Sorry, I was just watching something. You have to be a bit careful around here, you see. 77 Grange Road. 77 Grange Road. The old houses of Grange Road were down this way. Was down here, all of which was swept away by the Second World War. So yeah, that's our Plaistow Ghost, which turned out to be a headstone, and now on to our next little bit, which is more unpleasant than ghostly. We leave Upper Road and 1889 and the Plaistow Ghost, which was a headstone, and we must jump forward from 1889 and the Plaistow Ghost to May 1934. When East London Cemetery once again featured in the newspapers, thanks to the behaviour of a Plaistow resident by the name of, wait for it, Emily Jane Orchard. What a coincidence, eh? However, it has been found that no evidence to connect Emily to George Orchard, that they were closely related or anything like that. So yeah, it's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it? George Orchard, the young man who climbed up the drain pipe, and Emily Orchard. His was more of an innocent thing, but hers was definitely not. At the time of the incident, Emily lived at number 66 Falcon Street, only a short distance from the cemetery, which is where we're going now. I'm going to take you there now. Given that she was in her late 60s, she was unlikely to have been climbing street lamps, but she was more than capable of stealing flowers from graves. And it was for precisely this unpleasant activity that she achieved her brief notoriety. She was caught in the act by Mary Jane Johns, also a local resident of Willow Grove. You're a very wicked woman, Mary said to Emily. You have been stealing from these graves. I am sorry, said Emily. It is the first time I've done it. A cruel and nasty offence. The thief was hardly in a position to protest her innocence, as she was carrying 18 tulips, a bunch of white flowers, and probably with the intention of selling them on the street. She was charged at West Ham Police Court, where it was revealed that her haul was worth 2 shillings, and it cannot have helped her defence that in the previous 3 weeks there had been 50 complaints of theft of flowers from East London Cemetery. The magistrate, Mr. Forbes St John Morrow, did not mince his words. A cruel and dirty, nasty offence, he called it, and he fined the culprit 20 shillings with the option of 13 days in prison instead. But which of these punishments Emily Jane Orchard opted for is not recorded. For her flirtation with fame, or infamy, was over almost as soon as it had begun. And like the ghost of Plaistow, and the headstone, really, you should call it the headstone of Plaistow. But yeah, Not a very nice act, but we're going to be going walking from here to the address that she lived at, because it's not far from where I live, so we'll be covering that, number 66 Falcon Street. And the interesting thing with that is it's got, I checked it out this morning, it's got one of the original old street doors on it. So I like that, because it ties in nicely with our video that this lady would have walked through that street door and probably been arrested from it, I should think, unless they hauled her off from the cemetery, God knows. This was garages here. There were luxury flats or apartments going up now. So yeah, we'll be going to 66 Falcon Street, and that's our last location. No historical images or anything from this one. It's just a story from the 1930s, a true one. Not a very nice story, but it is Plaistow history and it ties in with the cemetery, and I thought I would mention it today. I don't often do that many tour videos of East London Cemetery because most of my own are buried in it, you see, and to conduct a tour I would have to go past most of their graves, and some bits of that's pretty upsetting because, yeah, well, you all know, don't you, but there we are. But I will get round to more tours of it because there are some interesting graves in there, of course. One I'm trying to find is Jack Warner, actor. I can't find where he is. This is Suffolk Road we're walking down now. Suffolk Road Primary School on our right, Suffolk Road stores on the left, St Helens Roman Catholic Primary School right in front of us. Some say that Plaistow, particularly Ann Street and that little patch where Ann Street, the Church of St Philip's and St James's, some say that that's quite badly haunted because that got flattened in the war and quite a lot of people died in that. We're almost at our location. Here's St Helens School just in front of me there. We're going to cross over, preferably without getting killed. The Church of St Helens, which is a Roman Catholic church attached to a convent, I will cover soon. It's just down that way. And here we are, Falcon Street. And we're almost at the address of Emily Jane Orchard in 1934. And here we are. Emily Jane's address, number 66 Falcon Street. That's where she lived. Whether she was arrested from here or the cemetery, I do not know. But yeah, that ends our little Halloween fest for tonight. Hope you all found this interesting, and thanks for watching. And that concludes our Halloween's viewings, All Souls Day. I hope you all found these two interesting. If you did, please give it a like and a share. Thanks very much for doing so. I'll see you all again in the next video on All Souls Day now.